That's the one I saw today, and he's like, you guys were talking, and then he's like, Bishop Olmsted, I got his approval. I'm like, all right.
Well, no,
Started going.
The weird thing was, so 7 years ago, he asked to be able to do a podcast, and then he hasn't like followed up on that. So the bishop said he could only publish the or publicize the podcast to his parishioners. And I was like, that can't possibly be right at all. That can't be right. So that's why he went to his deanery to get approval to be on our podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, we're not that big of a deal, I promise. And we're not that. I don't think we do not say anything that speaks against the church. So
there's no heresy going on.
I mean, no. We have none of that. None of that, Kay. None of that.
I've never heard that before. That's kind of amazing.
It was pretty remarkable to see or to hear that he had to go to his deanery to get approval and stuff. I was like, ooh, that's something strong. Oh, Bob's recording from a new location today. Hey-o.
I'm trying to get this thing done.
Living room.
Talked about earlier, Phil.
Check.
That deal that's got to go for.
Yep.
The White House is asking about, and OSD and stuff. So I'm going to do that at the same time. Hi, William. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I still got to have an A job. I can't just podcast full time and be successful. Like you, we're open to all your tips on how we can just do it all the time.
Oh man, have a supportive spouse. That's pretty much the key.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I was in banking for 15 years, and my last day was September 3rd. And it was about June. She's like, it's time for you just to do what you love to do full time. So I do this, I write and help with the parish. That's kind of what I do. But of course, at the time I was teaching the kids. All four were here doing virtual learning. So that was a big key to it too, why I had to stay home. Because my wife's like, I'm not having anything to do with that.
Wow. You got a lot of balls that you were juggling in the air.
It was fun. They went back to school on March 22nd, though. Thankfully, for their sake, because they hadn't seen their friends in over a year at that point, and their grades are starting to go up now, and they're having fun. They're being kids, so that's great.
Makes me super important. Yeah. To let them be kids is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
It amazes me. I mean, kids are resilient no matter what, but it just amazes me how this pandemic has really strongly impacted them, and I believe their mental development.
Well, yeah, my youngest two are twins, and they're 7 years old now, and they're boy and girl. My daughter she was totally good with the virtual learning. She would get done by 10 a.m. And she's like, I can do whatever I want now. I could play on YouTube. I can go play in the backyard, whatever. But my son, he's like, I hate computer school. I want to be in real school. I miss my friends. Why can't I do this? Like it was a battle. Now he gets out of bed, no problem. He gets dressed. He packs a snack. He goes to the bus without me even having to tell him.
Wow.
Because I like to go with him. This morning he walked out without me. I'm like, hold on, dude, let's go. I'm gonna go with you. And he comes home. He does his homework on the bus, and he comes home and plays, and they're seeing their friends. That's the big thing. They didn't see their friends for so long, and it was really hard for them.
Yeah, we're the development we live in. So I have kids, probably many of William's kids' age, if I had to guess. If I had to shoot in a barrel with 8 of them, I probably have some of them that are in the same age range. And we have kids in our development. We're a development that's kind of in a rural area. And so we have kids that are the same ages of most of our kids. So for the pandemic, they were just playing with kids their age, and it worked the whole time. Yeah. I mean, there was maybe like a week period where we're like, no, we got to stay away. And then, well, you can play outside. Yeah, you guys can play. Oh, you guys it's raining outside. You guys need to play inside? Sure. it just it got more lax pretty quickly. And I mean, I know that helped our kids, and I know the neighbors' kids too, because, sometimes there'd be, 4 or 5 or 6 extra kids in our house playing because they just didn't have that opportunity otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, the kids right next door, they would come over. But my son is 12, and he kind of he's a pretty laid back kid.
Mm-hmm.
He loves to read. He loves his video games. But all the kids next door are girls, and he's like, he's still in that cootie stage,
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Let that ride as long as you can.
Absolutely,
I will.
Absolutely.
All right, we got to introduce this podcast so I can get that in there, and then I'll introduce William if that works. Okay. Welcome to the Strange Catholics podcast and the Strange Catholic Show. This week, we have a very special guest, William Hemsworth. He's a convert to the Catholic faith and lives with his wife and 4 children in Tucson, Arizona. He's a podcaster. You can find his podcast, Know the Faith, Defend the Faith, on Podbean, and there'll be a link in the description. He also has a beautiful YouTube channel. You can find it at youtube.com/The Bible Catholic. There'll also be a link in the description. He also has he's a beautiful author and blogger, and you can read about some of his transitions into the faith, what are some of the things that he struggled with, but then also input that he's gained from all these books that he's read and these other people that he's hosted on his show. You can find that at williamhemsworth.com. He teaches children and adults in his parish. And William, we're just so elated to have you on our podcast. Welcome to the Strange Catholic Show.
Well, it's my pleasure to be on. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you've been on with so many like big hitters in the Catholic world, right? But I know that, so I've listened probably to the majority of any of the other people on the show. I've listened to most of what you put out, so I'm in the lead. But I mean, you've really, really had some phenomenal interviews. So I just wanted to highlight, like, what was it that kind of got you started in this direction to really seek out and find these great contributors to our Catholic faith? And, kind of how did you even get that started?
Well, the podcast itself, in June, it'll be 2 years that it's been going. And tomorrow we'll be uploading episode 143. So pretty exciting.
That's awesome.
But pretty much what has happened is I told my wife, I was like, look, I'm teaching at the parish. What I want to do is be more available to the community here in Tucson, and just basically those who are out there. Oh, sorry, I had to hit my mic, guys. But she's all on board. She's like, however I can help you, go for it. So I booked some, and I'm a big fan of Gary Machuda.
Yes.
And I emailed Gary Machuda because, everything about the Deuterocanon, Gary Machuda knows about it.
I know he does.
And so I emailed Gary Machuda. I was like, hey, Gary, I'm starting this podcast. I would love for you to be on my show. And he responds like the next day. He's like, yeah, I would love to be on your show. Do you want to come on mine? I was like, what? I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? You're on Virgin Most Powerful Radio. You're Gary Machuda. You influenced me with your debate with James White about the Deuterocanon.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, yeah, he invited me on his show. 2 days later, I interviewed him. And really, I just started emailing. And honestly, I'll be honest, the pandemic totally helped me in that regard because the travel was like canceled for a while.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
And so one day I'm like, I'm going to email Steve Ray. I emailed Steve Ray. He's like, yeah, let's do it. I emailed Scott Hahn's PR, and they're like, yeah, you can talk about his new book, Hope to Die. And I'm just emailing people. Some say no. Mostly everyone says yes. Because honestly, what I found by doing this for a couple of years is that all of us have the same goal. We want to evangelize. We want to get the message out about Jesus and his church. And so we all want to work together. And that's really, it's a beautiful thing. So really just asking. I email, I Facebook message, I DM on Twitter, DM on LinkedIn. And I would just ask. And more often than not, it's a yes. And I have great conversations, being able to grow in my faith as well, because most of the people I interview, if not all of them, know so much more about the faith than I do. And it's just great to pick their brain, learn from their experiences on how to further minister. So it's been fun. It's been a blast. really love doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the people you've had on are just amazing. So it's really cool to see kind of. I mean, I know it's been 2 years in the making, but clearly your show has gained a lot of popularity, and you're really getting some huge guests in there to really help share that spirit of evangelization. I think some of the Steve Ray shows have been some of the most impactful to me personally. Just the way he helps break things down to help see through some, get some clarity on some of the things that can be maybe not always clear, or maybe we don't always fully understand. He's,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
among
Steve,
many, right? You've had many
right.
guests that I would say that about.
Steve Ray is so full of energy, and the way that he presents things, it's not complicated the way he presents it. He explains it in the most simplest way possible, but in a way where it doesn't lose its theological appeal. Like I did a show recently with him on Marian typology, like
Yes.
Old and New Testament. And I'm like, okay, I read this in Irenaeus. Okay, I understand. The way he explained it, I was like, whoa.
I know. I listened to it a couple
Whoa.
times. Yeah, that's how I was.
and I'm having him on next month. We're going to talk about the flood theory. So that should be pretty fascinating too, just because of his Baptist background as well, and that's kind of what he grew up believing. But the way that he just explains things, it's so energetic. His catechesis is impeccable. He loves typology. If you mess with him and say you want to talk about typology, he's gonna be all in. He'll be like, yeah, let's do it. I remember when we were emailing with that show, because my shows are about 30 minutes long. Sometimes they go a little longer. He's like, I need about 6 hours of your time to do this. This is my daughter, Alexis, by the way.
Hello, Alexis. I know she can't hear us, but.
Hi, Alexis.
Sorry, I had a do not disturb sign on the door, but she needs her markers.
Markers are necessary. I get it.
Markers are life for a child, that's for sure.
Here. You're welcome. Oh, I forgot the purple one.
Purple one. Come on, William. Come on.
All right. Sorry about that, guys.
No, totally fine. Hey, life happens.
Yeah, life happens.
I mean, there are times when we're recording and before we actually get started recording the show, Phil will bring his beautiful brand new baby in just to say hi to the guys. So yeah, no, it's great. It's great stuff.
I'll hear a funny story. The first time I was on Gary Machuta's show, Alexis came in and she's like, this is on a commercial break, thankfully, because the show is live. He's like, Dad, I really have to poop. And Philip and Brian are in the bathroom. So I'm like, okay, I can't do much about it.
I love it. I love it.
Like, oh my gosh. Thankfully it was on commercial.
Well, and so what I love is when my 4-year-old will say, Dad, will you wipe me? Yes, I will. I will.
Right.
Come on, we kind of had this down a little while ago. We kind of slipped back.
It happens.
The things we do as parents, right?
Families are great.
It's a blessing, though. It's a blessing. I never thought in a million years I'd be blessed with 4 of them. But last time around, we got a 2 for 1. So we were all right.
2 for 1. I love that. Yeah, we have no twins in our 8, so they're all singles. I don't know what I would do with twins. It's a handful with the ones we have. To think of any of them as twins, that would be another level.
My wife and I talked about this a lot. If thankfully they were number 3 and 4, if they were number 1 and 2, I think it would have been a different ball game.
But then it also would have conditioned you. So I know we have a lot of friends that some of their first kids were twins. So they said, well, we got conditioned with twins, and then there was only one.
Yeah, that's a good point. Never thought of that. Yeah.
And we were like, why? What else do we need to do? Because we were already used to changing 2 diapers at once, changing 2 kids at once, getting 2 kids ready to go and everything. And it was like, well, I guess I never thought of that, but it's enough with 1 at a time. Yeah. And I mean, twins are another level. All right, Terry, what questions do you have for William? Sorry,
No, totally fine, Phil. I mean, I will just share this. My wife and I have 5 of our own. Our oldest is actually married, And now we are grandparents and will be grandparents for the second time coming up in July.
Congratulations.
So thank you. Thank you. Pretty awesome. I'll tell you what, if you love parenthood, grandparenthood, you want to talk a whole new level, there it is for you. It's pretty darn awesome. So, and I get an opportunity to spend some time with the grandbaby tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to that. So,
that's great.
But the first question I guess I would have is, tell me, who is your most memorable guest? Do you have a most memorable guest in the 2 years that you have done podcasting?
My most memorable, I would say, would be Steve Ray. Like I said, his energy is just contagious. He makes me want to study more, as I realize, it's the same with a lot of my guests. I realize how much I don't know, but with Steve Ray, it takes it to a whole other level. And I'm a catechist myself. I want to be able to, I don't want to say I want to be Steve Ray, but I want to be able to communicate the faith in a way that he can, with the energy to get people excited about it, and still tell it truthfully, but as simply as possible. And that's been a great one. And don't get me wrong, Scott Hahn was great. I'm a big Scott Hahn fan. My last objection to coming into the church was the Assumption of Mary. That was my very last objection. And I was in contact with the Coming Home Network. They sent me a couple books. I got those in the mail. And that night, a YouTube video from Scott Hahn explaining the Assumption came into my feed on Facebook. And it was like every objection he was talking about were the ones I had. And so that's a special place in my heart because, and I told him this, he actually called me. He hung up, and after that first interview, and he called me back. He's like, yeah, I just want to talk to you for a little bit. I'm like, what do you mean you want to talk to me for a little bit? You're Scott Hahn. I know you're super busy right now.
Right.
But he's like, no, like, how's the family? How's your kids? And I told him, like, Dr. Hahn, this is you're a big influence. And I'm sure he hears this all the time. He has to hear it all the time, I'm assuming.
Oh, I'm sure.
But he's like, so,
yeah.
but he's so shocked about it. He's so humble about it. I said, that video you made on the Assumption was the final thing that brought me into the church. And he's like, he had this look. He's like, what? Really? My video? I'm like, yeah, your video that has 300,000 views. Yeah, your video.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
But one of the most emotional guests I had, she's a lady, Kimberlee Jones. She grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. And I've had her on a couple times, and this last time she explained how she found the Trinity in Scripture. And she came, and pretty much how that caused her to start questioning Jehovah's Witnesses. She came across, like, for those that don't know, their New World Translation in John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. So it takes away the divinity of Jesus. And
wow, okay.
And she explained it from the Old Testament all the way through the New. And she said how she came across something on the internet about how John 1:1 was falsely translated, and then how that got her thinking, okay, this Trinity thing is legit. It's real. And then she came across a video from Steve Ray about the papacy, and she said that was the last thing. But it all started with her diving into Scripture, trying to research the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses, and she discovered the Trinity. And of course, they don't believe in the Trinity, and that caused her to leave Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's a heartbreaking story because her sister left, and she said that most people that leave become atheists because they've been so scandalized by the things that they were taught that they don't know if anything is true. So they just stop believing in anything. Oh, wow, and she's like, okay. So here I am. I'm a Jehovah's Witness, and all of a sudden, I find myself wanting to be Catholic. And she's like, of course, this caused a big scandal in my family, and some of her families shunned her. So she sacrificed a lot to become Catholic. That was a very emotional story. And I just thinking like, would I have that courage to do what she did once I found out what the truth was? Because that's a big thing. You're leaving, and I believe she said she was third generation Jehovah's Witness. Like, this isn't something only she was doing. This is going back to her grandparents. So it was a big deal. So that was very emotional, very, very emotional. So that one sticks out to me just because it's so powerful, absolutely powerful.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, really impactful story. When I was hearing her kind of break apart how she found the Trinity, I was like, oh, I never thought of it like that. Just because,
Right.
we have I guess because I was raised in a Christian house. I mean, the Trinity was just something that we already knew and expected, or just it was a thing, right? But to come from someone that had never had it, but had something very filtered, especially their scriptures are very filtered from what we have in our, Catholic scriptures. It was just, I remember hearing that interview and listening to it a second time and just saying, I just never thought of it like that. I mean, that was illuminating, for
Right.
Someone who's been through the scriptures quite a bit, but I was like, oh, I just never thought of it in the way, so I'll leave a link in the description for that episode because it is pretty powerful.
Right. And the way she described it is she went from Jehovah's Witness, and then she started attending an evangelical Bible study because the last thing she wanted to do was become Catholic. But she still found the more she studied, the more she knew she had to do it.
Yeah.
And so she's been in the church, I think about I can't right now. I'm doing it. Sorry. They normally don't do this.
You're good.
But
I'm a master editor. It'll never happen. They won't even know it happened.
It doesn't really matter because I'm not really paying attention either. Who's the guest this week?
Yeah.
What's his
Okay,
name again?
Bob. Okay, Bob.
He's silent and then he chimes in with a wise guy comment like that.
That's
all right. It's funny
I'm the
stuff.
comic relief. That's all I am.
That's needed. That's needed in every group. It's all good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
that one was powerful. Sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about the writing because you have quite a prolific amount of writing you have out there, from the many places where you're being published, wherever it might be, and then even on your own blog. I mean, there's a lot there. So kind of what do you use as kind of the inspiration for some of these beautiful, these blogs or articles that you're writing? What is some of that inspiration? Where do you find some of that?
Lately, honestly, from YouTube. There's some great channels I follow, and they get my gears thinking. Like Reason and Theology is one. They go deep. They dive into a lot of stuff that I never thought of.
Yeah,
and it's just fascinating. William Albrecht's channel as well. He's also part of Reason and Theology, but he has his own thing where he'll deep dive into the subject matter, like into the fathers, into scripture. He'll deep dive into something, just one subject, and take an hour or two. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't sit around and watch 2 hours of YouTube every day, but I'll break it up in chunks. Okay. But a lot of the stuff, just things I may see on social media, things maybe they need some clarification, and some of it is honestly some stuff I'm just updating from previous posts right now, to make it more relevant. Like this morning, I posted one about Jehovah's Witnesses, and I posted the video from Kimberlee in there.
Yep.
Because before that, I had the video from Gary Machuda talking about it. And so I have that video and Kimberlee's in there, just so people can hear it from a cradle Catholic and from someone who was actually in it.
Yeah.
That way they see that. But I really love writing about, probably my favorite thing to write about is the Eucharist, just because reading the church fathers hammered that home for me when I was a Protestant. Especially when I was in seminary studying the church fathers to prove that they weren't Catholic. So the Eucharist is a big one. The Trinity, I love writing about the Trinity, just because we could write about that all I read about that my whole life, and it won't be exhausted because it's such a mystery.
Yes.
But I've read about my guests as well. Most of the guests I have on, and I'm trying to get better at this. I'm getting better as I go along because I'm learning. Is I'll make a blog post with the video in it, but I'll do a write up what my guest has done, what they're doing, links to their work, and they appreciate it. And in SEO terms, it builds the backlinks, so it pings off everything better. They're seen more.
Yep.
But yeah, the Trinity, the Eucharist, anything about the church fathers, I just love writing about, just because they've helped me so much, especially the early ones, like Justin Martyr. Polycarp is probably my favorite, but there's only one book written that we have from him, but we can learn so much from it.
Oh yeah, there's a lot there.
There's a ton there. Oh my gosh, a ton.
Certainly are many fish there.
Tons, absolutely. But yeah,
Bob is making a joke with the Polycarp, the many fish. See how he is. Many fish. Yep.
You see,
you
he said that.
Way too serious.
He said, I was thinking of the ichthys fish. You know, that's what I thought. But right now I'm actually I finished writing my conversion story. So I'm just waiting to see if it gets picked up by anyone. But that's all done. I wrote that. I put off writing that for so long because what's another conversion story? There's a million of them out there. But I'm sitting on my couch one day and I was watching Keith Nestor's conversion story on YouTube. YouTube has a lot to play in this, I see. I'm thinking and I'm watching his, and all of a sudden I hear this voice like, it's time for you to get yours out there. Because I've talked about it on podcasts before.
Yeah.
But I've done short blog posts about it, but I've never actually gone into detail. And so that's what I did. I talked about how when I was 12, my parents taking me to church, how my first encounter with the Catholic Church was as a chaplain assistant in the Army when I was working at the chapel, and I just go from there. So that brought up a lot of memories that I didn't remember. So that was good therapy for me too. So I a lot of things through that process. But honestly, as far as the writing goes, sometimes I'll wake up and, I'm one of those early risers. That's one of those hangovers from the military. Wake up at 5 a.m. in the shower, like, that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and do that today. And sometimes it's inspired by the mass readings too. I read the mass readings every day. The mass readings will get my mind going on something. And so that, what I see in social media, especially lately with, not treating people nicely, has been helping out too. But I kind of ride all over the place. It's not just one or two topics. I kind of dabble in everything.
So if you would, William, elaborate a little bit more on that idea of your conversion story. Maybe share with our podcast listeners just a high level view. I mean, I know you said you were looking to get it published, but maybe just give us a synopsis. What is your conversion story? I'm fascinated in hearing, as a cradle Catholic, how people come to something that I was born into.
Okay.
And just so we're clear, William, there's not that many listeners beyond us that are going to hear this, because we don't have a very big following. We're hoping that you'll help us springboard into success.
Glad to help any way I can. All right. So like I said, my parents started taking me to church. My mom started taking me to church when I was 12. My dad stayed home the first couple of weeks to watch football. But there was a church down the street. It was Sunset Wesleyan Church. And so for those that don't know, the Wesleyan Church is part of the Methodist faith tradition. And when I was 13, I made a profession of Christ. I chose to be baptized. My parents actually didn't know that I wanted to be baptized. I filled out that card in church that said I wanted to be baptized. And my mom found out when the pastor sent a letter for the baptism class. So she was kind of excited about that. But I started, as I was reading through the Bible in my teenage years, I would come across some things that were questionable. Like Hebrews 6, it's talking about how Christians could fall away. They could choose to fall away. I was taught once saved, always saved. And then I was told the classic line, well, they weren't really Christian to believe it. Well, I'm like, it's not what it says here. Then in chapter 10, it says the same thing. So I kind of put that on the shelf. So I joined the army when I enlisted when I was 17, went to basic training when I was was a chaplain assistant. So I felt the call to ministry, to do something in ministry. So I was like, that's a good thing to do. And as a chaplain assistant, you help with the spiritual care of soldiers. You coordinate religious services and everything.
Carry a gun.
Carry a gun. Yeah, you bodyguard for the
chaplain. That's right.
That's right. That's right. Best job I ever had. Wish I was still able to do it. But the first weekend I was stationed at Hunt Army Airfield, Georgia, I had to work the services, and the first service was an Episcopal service, and then the 9:30 was the Mass. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to see what this Mass is about. So I stayed in the mezzanine level. And, I had those presuppositions, Catholics don't read the Bible. Priests don't preach. I had that in my mind for some reason. And so, here the Old Testament reading, the Psalm, there was a reading from Romans, then a reading from the Gospel of Mark. I was like, wow, that's a lot of Bible. It's a lot more than the 3 verses I'm used to hearing on a Sunday morning. And then this priest, Chaplain Livingston, I'm not joking when I say this, he got up and gave a 45-minute homily on the Gospel of Mark on that reading that day. And I remember this vividly because it caused the Protestant service to start 20 minutes late. And the base chaplain was the pastor, the lieutenant colonel. He was not quite happy about that. I remember that pretty vividly. But so those 2 presuppositions were kind of kicked out of the can. But I was 19, so I had, other things on my mind, as some 19-year-olds do. But fast forward, and I'm giving a synopsis. Fast forward to 2003, I get stationed on Fort Huachuca here in Arizona, and I'm working on Halloween night in 2003. And the lady who I'd known for a few months would turn out to be my future mother-in-law came up and said, I want you to come meet my daughter. I'm like, no, I got paperwork to do. An hour later, she comes back. You need to come meet my daughter. I'm like, I'm still doing this paperwork, Judy. I got to finish this. Have to get it to the commander. Half hour later, she's like, come meet my daughter. I'm like, all right, fine. So, went over, met my future wife. But I had the end. See, I knew her for a few months already. But when I proposed to her, she said, I want to get married in the Catholic Church. And so I'm like, all right, I'll just become Catholic then. So not a good, now I'd say become Catholic for the right reason. Do it because it's true, not to make someone else happy.
Oh yeah. Amen.
Because this led to problems later on, because I had to go through this whole annulment thing because, when I was 19 and 20, I did something stupid, right? So we went through the annulment, got the annulment done. All that. And I was like, okay, we'll go through RCA again. Went through RCA 2 times. Again, it was to make my wife happy. Got received into the church. Didn't really believe the church's teaching on the Eucharist. And like Fulton Sheen says, you don't believe that, everything else is going to start to crumble later on. And it did. It did. And eventually it led me, even though I was going to Mass with her, I was there physically, intellectually, I was Protestant again. And I was like, I'm going to have this great idea. I'm going to enroll in seminary, and I'm going to prove that the church fathers aren't Catholic, because I keep hearing that they're Catholic. Yeah. So one of the first guys we read was Justin Martyr. And I love Justin Martyr. Love his stuff. So Justin Martyr, I'm reading, and I read this it's a loose description of the Mass. But before he does that, he says, we have this Eucharist, but we don't see it as regular bread and wine. Once it's prayed over, it becomes the body and blood of Jesus, who was crucified for our sins. And then he goes into this description of, the memoirs, the prophets are read, memoirs from the apostles are read, and then the presider, talks about it. And then bread and wine is brought up. And I'm like, I'm thinking in my mind as I'm reading this, where is this church at? Where's this church? Right. And so I'm like, okay, I'll look for this church later on, because it doesn't seem like my friend's church, the Southern Baptist Church on the street. I was blinded by pride. And then I read Irenaeus. We had to write a paper, of all things, on the rule of faith. And for those that don't know who the rule of faith is, Irenaeus is challenging the Gnostics, saying, if you want to be part of the true church, you'll be able to trace your bishops back to the apostles. And then he talks about how all churches have to agree with the Church of Rome. And I call it the Holy Spirit with a frying pan moment. Because I was like, whoa, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble now.
Oh, yeah.
And
nobody
so
loves heresies more than me.
Hey, yeah. That's Irenaeus. Read his stuff. I always tell people read against heresies because you'll never be the same.
Yeah,
ever.
we were required to, I believe, weren't we, gentlemen, to read a bunch of Irenaeus.
Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
We were blessed to. Maybe we had the opportunity to.
Yeah.
We could
We
say
were
it that way.
required to. However you
A little
wanted
bit
to
of
put
both.
it. We were told we had to do it. You can accept it in however you want to accept it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
We were forcibly blessed, right?
Exactly. And then, like I said, the last objection I had was the Assumption of Mary, and then Scott Hahn blew that out of the water. And as soon as I saw that video, and this was a Friday night, so I went to confession the next day. I was like, bless me, Father, I've sinned. It's been, I think it was like 3 or 4 years at that point, 3 or 4 years since my last confession. And I'm crying because I'm like, I've done everything to get my wife out of the church at this point. She stood by me this whole time. And she's such a prayer warrior. She said, I needed you to find it on your own. I could have had all these people talk to you. That would have just pushed you away. And she was right. That would have just pushed me away. But she just prayed for me, and I eventually came to embrace the truth. Anyway, I was crying, and Father Schubert, God rest his soul, I said, it's in 3-4 years. I think it was 4 years since my last confession. He's like, did you bring us a lunch? We just started laughing in the confessional. I'm sure people outside are like, what is going on in there? But he's like, son, I appreciate what you're telling me, but you're here. You're here now.
Yes.
So we'll see you tomorrow in mass. So don't worry about all those things. You're forgiven. Let's just move forward from here. And that's what we did. We moved forward from there. And kind of long story short, here we are today. I've been blogging for about 3 years. A couple years ago, I wanted to do this podcast, and slowly but surely, the Holy Spirit has weird things. Like once you do one thing, you kind of get confident with these. Like, since you do that one thing, you can do this too. It's just things, more and more things. So I help with kids. I help with RCIA. And now I'm doing this, writing and doing this, and it's such a blessing. And looking back, I laugh, but at the same time, I'm like, how blind was I? Because it was definitely pride. Like I didn't want to see it. Like so many converts, I'm like, okay, Catholic Church seems to be true, but I have this plan, and if I do that, this plan is not going to work out. But you take that leap of faith.
Yes.
Holy Spirit wants us to follow the truth, and he knows where the truth leads. And thankful to have found the truth, and here I am. So that's a synopsis of the story.
Terrific story. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's amazing.
And it's wonderful. And what I would say is it's not really, even though it's unique because it's you, it's not really that uncommon. I mean, a lot of us have similar types of journeys, that very similar. And there's something to be said for that. I mean, there's a core, with all of this. I mean, there's just really, we're very, very close. I don't have the right word for it, but I just think there's a lot of commonality between our stories and this type of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm a convert. Phil is as well. Terry is Terry.
He's a cradle Catholic, so he's the oddball out.
I am the weird one of the bunch. I'm the strangest of the strange Catholics.
I was going to say a strange Catholic, right? But I was going to save that.
I come from more of like an agnostic / atheist background. Not really atheism, but more of just a really negative vibe towards organized religion, very cynical, very, that's where my cynical side comes from, and that type of thing. So I really had a steep mountain to climb to get where I am today. So, but there's a lot of I can hear and feel a lot of the same emotions when you're going through your story.
Yeah, it was definitely a blessing, and I learned a lot through that journey. I like to say I regret it, but at the same time, all the things I learned along the way, I'm able to use today. So I can't really say I guess I took the long way. I like to say it's a lot of hills and mountains and crevices and valleys in there, but through everything I learned something. So if I get messages every now and then, like, what do you say? What about the Eucharist? Why? I'm like, well, let's go to John 6, and then let's just go to what the early church actually taught. And I'll send them some quotes, and I'll send them the long form. Like, just don't read one quote. Here's the actual book. Check it out. Check it out for yourself. You're going to see what the church actually believed. And so that's why. And I love those emails just because they're so authentic. And sometimes I get the feeling that people are just trying to find someone to tell them not to do it.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
then
I
and
didn't
then when
do
you
that.
and then when you tell them, like, no, this is actually the truth. Sometimes you hear from them again, sometimes you don't. Maybe you hear from them a lot later on, but speak the truth, and
Yes.
it always that's the best thing. That's how the Spirit's going to work.
Any questions you have for us, William?
What made you guys decide to start your show?
Oh, we wanted to do this since 2015, so it was Bob poking and saying, "Okay, let's do this."
Well, yes and no. Okay, so I think I've asked numerous times over our formation time at St. John's before I deployed, and then Phil got ordained. I deployed, came back, and then came out here to the DC area and work out here now with the Department of Defense, and at least for the next few years. And then Terry got ordained, and I'd ask a few times, but when I got out here, I asked again, when are we going to do this again? And I think really Phil was like, okay, let's just, Phil would always say, I got ideas. I'm thinking about it or whatever. And then I said, let's just start. We have the technology. It's not that hard. And
Right.
Phil's a technological whiz. And then, I don't know, it's gone really, really well. I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised at what we've been able to do, what Phil's been able to do technologically, and what Terry's done with the Saint Spotlight. And he's really done a lot of extensive research, brings a lot, and I just show up. I think that's kind of what we do.
Shows up. He's here.
Yeah.
And he brings that great sense of humor with him.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
But I think these conversations really, started early on in our formation. We, the three of us, started together at the same time in the deacon formation program at St. John's. And part of that process was to do once a month a thing called spiritual companioning. We had a book with pictures of the St. John's Bible in it, and there was always supposed to be a topic. We never stuck to the topic.
We read every one of the topics because Bob had to submit the notes. So this is going to be published, Terry.
Yeah, Lectio and Visio Divina, right?
We did all that. We did all those things. The Visio Divina. Yep. We did all the topics, but then we had extra conversation. That's what I would say. I wouldn't say we didn't follow the topics. It's just we had extra conversation.
I had a lot to say.
We checked the boxes, and then we moved on to our conversation.
Had bonus content for the listeners.
That's right.
Exactly. Yes,
that's right.
Which is what was the fuel for the podcast.
Yeah, and I think what helps us, move forward on this is, we all have different views. I'm much more moderate. I am much more, not that they're not. I'm much more willing to ask really probing questions about the religion and kind of get out a little bit on the branch sometimes where I'm just kind of hanging because I look at it more in the wider world and the intersection of politics and a lot of that type of stuff. And I say some provocative things just to kind of spur some conversation. Phil is much more of I would say he's more conservative, and he's more of He likes to teach. He likes to talk doctrine, that type of stuff. And, Terry's just a happy man of hope, just wonderful and jolly to have around.
Yes, indeed.
Well,
The
balance each
Santa
other out.
Claus
So
of the
that's a
pod.
good mix.
We do.
Yeah.
We certainly do.
That's good. That's what you need.
We need
That's
some
what you need.
listeners. That's what we need.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, more listeners are always nicer, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's always
Uh,
nicer. Yeah.
Any final questions for William?
What do you see for the future for you and your podcast and your ministry and all the things you're doing? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
Hopefully 5 years from now, I'll be a deacon.
Praise be to God.
So we're going through that process. That whole annulment thing that I talked about a second ago, that's bringing up some issues. But we're working through it right now. A deacon friend of mine, I call him my mentor. He has a canon lawyer on it, he's talking with the bishop and everything, just trying to get everything worked out. I really want to continue doing the show. Hopefully there's radio somewhere in the mix. I would love to do radio, but right now I'm putting 2 episodes out a week, on 2 to 3 on the podcast. Really enjoy doing it. And I want to continue writing. Writing is what I love to do. Find it relaxing, but invigorating at the same time. But I want to get more involved in my parish too. Like I said, I talked about the deacon thing, but my wife and I are also helping with marriage prep. We started doing that in the last couple months. So we've had about 3 meetings with couples. That's been really fun. We've learned a lot about our relationship as well through the process. So pretty much whatever the Lord is putting in front of me, if that's His will, I'm gonna do my best to go for it. But definitely 5 years from now, hopefully the diaconate is there. That's really what I'm praying for. And if it's God's will, then it'll happen.
Well, we'll
Praise
certainly
be to
pray
God.
for you. Yes,
Thank you.
we'll certainly pray for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, William, so much for coming on our show, and we'll make sure to share all those links with everyone. Many blessings on your continued ventures, and just know of our continued prayers for you and your ministries.
Well, thank you very much. I pray for your ministries as well, your show. I really enjoy the show. Keep up the great work. And of course, I'll share the links everywhere as well. And God bless what you're doing too.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for your
much.
great posts on LinkedIn. Love them.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Take care. God
You
bless
too.
you.
Yep.
God bless you.
Thanks for joining us. We really
My pleasure.
appreciate it.
My pleasure. Glad to do it.